So like I've been a nurse now for nearly over 20 years, which is quite scary. I mean, started off as a staff nurse and then worked my way up and was lucky. So I've been in the NHS and in private healthcare, which has been really interesting to see both from different directions. And I was lucky enough to be the head of paediatric oncology at a private hospital in London, the Harley Street Clinic. And there, I guess that's where you always have patient safety as a nurse, right? It's always the key component as a nurse. It's the first thing you're drummed into, like, do no harm. It's all in the doctor's Hippocratic oath and everything. And how can we do that in a hospital has always been challenging. And then when I was at the Harley Street, it was even more challenging. I was the head of paediatric oncology, and we were doing some very novel trials and techniques, literally, that had never been done on children before, and obviously they were very protected. We care about it, and it's like brand new procedures and treatments while maintaining the safety aspect. So I became a real passionate advocate when I was the head of paediatric oncology, looking at just the basic errors we were making and how can we avoid. Unfortunately, when we go into healthcare, we're all human and mistakes do happen, but how can we eliminate them so when patients are coming for the best care, they're not actually going away with harm that we've caused them. And so that's where it became a real passion. And then I was lucky enough to switch into digital health during the pandemic, which was another eye-opener. And patient safety is a huge topic in digital health. One, because it's almost similar to what I was saying about Harley Street, it's a brand new area. How can we haven't learned all our lessons because it's too new in some aspects. How can we ensure that all these new technologies that we delve into, and AI and Gen AI is even more newer and a case, how can we ensure they are safe for patients? So I've been on that journey, and now I was at HUMA for a few years, and now I'm just contracting out on my own, doing advising various different companies on how to maintain patient safety. It's been it's a passion of mine. It's a real passion. With regards to patient safety, it's a really interesting one. It lies massively and it can improve everything, but it brings its own risks. There was a really interesting study that showed that it reduced some hospital instances by like 50 or 60%. And so take medicine management. It's one of the biggest areas of, and if you go into hospital, it's one of the biggest areas of errors in patient safety in hospitals, and quite often a lot of patient safety is focused around medicine management. How can digital health impact that? Can we create algorithms and tools that automatically calculate doses, check that the doctor, because where is the errors? In the prescribing. So it checks against the British National Formulary, the BNF, checks against the right sources to make sure you're prescribing the right drug at the right dose for the right condition. And then when it comes to dispensing the drug and the nurse is calculating it, can we use automated digital tools to do that? So you're trying to look at the areas of where there's errors and can digital health impact them. And there's loads. I think medicine management's a huge one. Diagnosis is another one. To check diagnosis and quickly turn them on as an aid is never going to replace the clinician, but as an aid. And then when we move to digital health and looking at access, I think is another big one. A lot of people who need healthcare are in harder to reach areas or poor or don't have access to healthcare. Can we create a big piece that's going on now is AI. Can we target them, create the algorithms? So actually, we know generally, say over 60s, the patients that we need to focus on more. Can we actually even narrow that down through AI algorithms to say, actually, these are the patients in these houses, and this patient's actually high risk, say they haven't been in contact, whatever the algorithm says, target those. Or can we use it to reach patients that don't normally have access to healthcare, and then equaling the burden? So it's making their say because they have access that they wouldn't be able to before, whether they're poorer, they're working harder, so they're working during the day, so they can have access to out of hours care through the internet, through an algorithm, through some type of digital health. They're living in rural areas, they can't get to their local GP. How we can narrow that broadband by making digital health and telemedicine that allows them to have access. So there's hundreds of different ways. Yeah, and so in the UK, we're lucky. We have a great standard called the NHS Digital have come up with, and is part of UK law. Safety Act, Health and Social Care Act, is we have something called DCB 0129 and 0160 framework to work from. It's it's not perfect, but then it's new. And so, but it's a framework, and it's to embed it early on in the technology. For one, to look at your risk management procedures. Company or anyone that wants to procure into these new innovative devices, how can we match innovation with patient safety? How can we match innovation or drive to be fast forward? Because a lot of innovation, if you look at technologies like Apple or Google, they like, oh, move quick, we'll get it wrong and we'll just fix it as we move across. And it's like, it's fine to get it wrong. And I've been in a lot of technology companies that say, don't worry, we're going to get it wrong, but we'll fix it. But then you can't always get it wrong when you're in digital health, because you get it wrong, a patient could die or a patient could be serious. So it's embedding those systems early on and into the culture. And that's one of the big things I do when I go into an organization, is like, how can we change your culture so it's patient focused and not technology focused? How it's innovative focused while maintaining that regulatory stance. And it's collaboration, it's working with everyone sitting there. I don't know everything. I mean, there's lots of things in technology I have no idea what they're talking about when they talk about some of the things they word out, but then I will throw medical jargon out that they have no idea about. Collaboration between all the stakeholders, the patients, the clinicians, the designers, the technologists, the business developers, the policymakers, everyone coming together when you're developing a new solution to say, what are we trying to achieve? Who are we trying to benefit? And then it's a risk management process. And that's what NHS Digital come up with in DCB 01290160. We've got brilliant standards that talk you through how to actually do a risk management process to look at how a new technology that you don't necessarily know, you're looking for the risks before they happen. And so you're trying to go with a very proactive approach rather than a reactive. But you also have, and the biggest thing that I think one of the things that we really need to work on is then that reactive. If you look at hospitals now, there's massive datexes, they report their instances, there's an annual report, they share their learnings. Same with the airline industry. Boeing has an incident, Airbus knows about it. And so what we got to learn, and what I'm find, and I think it's a big challenge that I think we need to address, is because these are new technology companies, they hold on to the information to themselves. Incident, or they notice a problem with their platform or their app or their algorithm or their virtual ward, they won't necessarily publicize it and like, oh, we noticed that patients will always press these buttons, or they'll always enter a blood pressure wrong, or they won't, or they'll ignore an algorithm when it says this, and we thought they would do this. No one is sharing the information in healthcare, in digital health, currently with each other. And I think that's something that we will be massively benefit. So we're all learning, because what you'll probably find is every digital health organization is finding the same mistake, but we're not learning, and everyone will fix it in a slightly different way, but we're not all learning from each other. So you can improve moving forward is a shared cohort of learning between digital health providers to say, where are we seeing the patient safety issues? Where are we getting the learnings? So we're not all making the same mistake and we're able to fix it together. Well, the inverse care law is basically the people who most need care have the least access to it. And the digital care law basically does the same, i.e. we know that the people who are most at risk and mostly are going to hospitals and mostly need virtual wards, and mostly their GPs are people who are on lower incomes and generally older. That's very basic, but it's even more complicated than that. And if you look in digital health or even healthcare in itself, they're the ones that have least access to care. And digital health, the older people are, without being too stereotypical, older people are going to be the ones that are least likely to be able to have a smartphone, how to use a smartphone, have least access to be able to use a MacBook or the computer, living in rural areas. Poorer people have least access to Wi-Fi, maybe on a lower payment plan on their phones. They don't have as much data to share than everyone else. And if we're pushing everything towards digital health and this amazing atmosphere, how can we ensure that we're not leaving those behind? And that's one of the big tackling points. And it does, and I'll come on to gender and other issues in a point. That's just with the basics. And then as we move into AI and Gen AI, and we're creating all these algorithms and these fast track things which can really speed healthcare up, how can we ensure they're not becoming biased into these algorithms? Because one of the healthcare disparities they have, a lot of algorithm and AI healthcare algorithms are based on data sets that are out there. And there's ones like the UK Biobank and all sorts, which are brilliant data sets, but they have their limitations. They generally are based on white, male, 20 to 40-year-old men that are in the middle class. So I'm fine, but but everyone, but a majority of other people out there are sadly, the algorithm won't necessarily work for them. So when we're building algorithms, how can we, and all these general Gen AIs and we're moving into, how can we ensure that we are not exacerbating those already existing trends? If we're looking at something that's going to predict who is more at risk of having a cardiac event, a cardiac attack, who is more at risk of getting prostate cancer, who is at more risk of getting breast cancer, who's more risk of getting diabetes, whatever it may be, or which cohort do I think is going to end up in A&E this month and get them help. You've got to build that data set to ensure that it is equal access, that it's equal access in gender, there's equal access in age, it's equal access in socioeconomic, that's equal access in ethnicity, everything. And otherwise, you're asking for trouble, and it's and you're just going to exacerbate those problems even further. So that's one thing I really look at when is my big #1 focus when it's an AI generated algorithm that we are looking in digital health. It's like, what's our data set and where is it trained and how have we got that information and how does it address the population we're doing? And there's no point, it doesn't have to be diverse. It depends what you're doing. If you're doing a prostate cancer one, you don't need to worry about, you generally don't have to worry about women in your data set. You don't have to worry about having 20-year-old men. It's your whatever data set you're focusing on your problem. And so, and that's where people go wrong often. And I think then it just exacerbates that health inequality further, because it's just targeting those people that would already be getting the access to the healthcare and leaving behind and making it worse for those others. But on the flip side, if you get it right, it really has the opportunities to improve those health inequalities. And we know that from all the studies that are out there, especially in rural healthcare and in the elderly population and those on lower socioeconomic, or those parents with kids, etc. If they can access by just inputting text messaging while they're at work or whatever, rather than going to their GP, and mother that's got 3 kids and doing school runs and doing what, and she doesn't have the time to go to a GP, then if we get it right, we can actually improve and make healthcare honestly equal for everyone, because it doesn't matter if you're poor, it doesn't matter if you're slightly older and can't get to, or you have mobility problems, or you're rural healthcare. It can break down all those barriers and make sure every single person has the equal access to care. But that comes through planning, training, ensuring that you've tested your whatever device, whatever platform you're using for your digital health on the right population, that you've looked at where the problems are in access, that we have government help in making sure that Wi-Fi is accessed in certain, broadband is accessed in certain rural populations, and you've tested that, and you've got backup. Should we just use a telephone? Is this the right platform to be using in this area? If I'm going to a rural area with 0 broadband, then there's no point having a Google Meets platform. I need the telephone. And so am I ensuring that it's the right thing? If you do that, then we know digital health can improve those areas, and actually they love it that the elderly population or the lower socioeconomic population, well, it will actually improve their access to care and then improve their health outcomes by that, and save the NHS money, and there'll be health benefits. So there's benefits all around, but you've got to think about it and put the money up front. Regulatory bodies and quality management systems are always seen as a bit of a pain to most people. And they're seen as like a hurdle and like a barrier, or all sorts of names have been called, especially when I try to introduce new regulating. And again, I think it comes down to a culture of how can you do innovative medicine? How can you to just deliver your normal care as a nurse or whatever, while maintaining the regulatory or the government or the governance standards, or whatever standards that you put in place in your hospital or your organizations. So a lot of it comes down to culture, communication, when you're trying to address these things. And the new PSERF is fantastic. It really is, and it's trying to broaden those and actually really make it equal access to everyone, make it easier, more inclusive of everyone to be including the patient and everyone to input into patients. and really take that inclusive approach rather than just being your hospital governance team or your regulatory team telling you this is the way it's done, because no one's going to respond. And so it needs to be, all these new regulations and things need to be done in a collaborative approach, and for everyone to understand the reason behind them without it impacting their day-to-day work. So, and that's the challenge and the exciting part of how to implement all these. If you get it right, then everyone's singing on the same page. They understand it, because everyone in healthcare, whether it's a nurse, cleaner, anyone in digital health, anyone creating a digital health tool that's an app designer, are all there for the same reason. They want to improve the health and outcomes of that person they're designing, looking after, cleaning for. And so, and I firmly believe that. So if you get them on page that this is just another tool to help that, then they're all on board, and trying to make it as easy as possible. So whatever framework you're using has to have that collaborative approach, to be proactive in looking for patients' risk rather than reactive. So anyone that sees a risk is able to report it before the actual fact of actually the error has actually happened. And so that, and you build that culture in, and that's what the frameworks really need to, are looking at and should be looking at. Yeah, and it's coming back to your change management tools. The first thing is communication. Right, my biggest one is communication, and multidisciplinary. And that thing is like, you shouldn't be lecturing someone on patient safety. Everyone needs to be, and it needs to come from the top down to the bottom and bottom to the top. Everyone needs to be involved in patient safety. Everyone needs to be on board, and everyone is on board in their hearts, but everyone needs to buy into, I'm passionate about it, but it might not make everyone else's passion exciting. How do you get it into, it become the focus? And you have an app, if in digital health, for instance, an organization, the app designer has no idea what is a patient safety risk and isn't. How do you buy into that multidisciplinary workings? So it's the biggest thing is communication, teaching, making sure everyone understands the reasons behind what you're doing, because you're not going to get everyone on board unless they understand the reasons and what, when, how are we going to do this, and then really make it an inclusive approach rather than one person just going, there is this issue, this is how we're going to fix it. It's asking everyone for their input on how there is an incident, or you're proactively looking to try and reduce the risk of anything happening. How do we all think, where is the risk? Because the cleaners in a hospital or an app designer has a very different view of where the risks are to what I do. And so it's the approach of everyone having an equal voice, missing as culture, having this very open, non-blame culture, and understanding that we are all human. And I think the biggest lesson is, again, to do that multidisciplinary work and get those clinicians in early. And that's the biggest lesson. It's like as early in the project as you possibly can. Have those conversations early, because so many times, and it's really heartbreaking. Like, we have people who have designed this most beautiful app, and they've worked at Deliveroo or wherever, and they built this beautiful app for a patient, and then you go, oh, but you've done ABC. And if only you bought me this in the style, I would have said, this is the issues you've done. And it's heartbreaking to tell someone that, it's heartbreaking to tell someone their work's not rubbish, but you're like, oh, there's these issues, and you've got to undo it. But early, because it's going to save you time and money after all, which is every organization wants to do. Conversations and those risk management processes and those thought processes so early in the evolution, whether it's just adopting an electronic health record, whether it's just moving from paper to digital, whether it's just implementing a simple algorithm that calculates your BMI, whatever it is, bring in all the people you need to as early as you possible, just around the table. It doesn't even need to be long, half hour, brainstorm. Go away, come back if you've got any issues or you think of anything that we've missed. Just make sure there's an early conversation rather than just one team running away and trying to change something and then you're having. So the two things, I'd say two things to me that I've learned is, one, and I know I've said it a lot, is creating this very open culture, non-blame, everyone having equal access to voice their opinions, the opportunity to highlight and contribute to patient safety without any animosity, but anyone saying that's stupid or anything. I think it all comes, and that's from a culture that gets embodied from top to bottom. It works both ways. And that for me is the most important thing with patient safety. It's all about the culture a company has and an ethos it has to really want to do patient safety. And that comes down to everyone being on board, and everyone having this open belief that they can really look and share the knowledge. And it comes down to communication and collaborative working. I'm a firm believer in multidisciplinary team working. It's saved so many of my patients' lives in so many different ways. And that's the biggest, is like multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, whatever you want to call it, is like shared, get everyone together, and that not one person knows the answer. And you'll find that one person will think of an idea, or they'll find a risk, or they'll come up with an issue that you've never thought of in a million years because your direction. So culture, openness, and really and bringing your whole team together. And when you're looking at patient safety, from looking at risks or learning from risks, get everyone together, and it's a whole team, multidisciplinary approach rather than just focusing on one area. If you just focus on the nurses or the clinicians or the doctors or the cleaners or the app designers, you're never going to get it right.